Going into the history of the Asian American term, it's a term created as an act of solidarity between a lot of different groups of people coming from the Asian continent that have some similar experiences, similar backgrounds.
Even though I grew up around a lot of other Asian Americans, I felt like there was lack of understanding of like my personal history and my like ancestral history.
My history and culture is something that I really don't know a lot about.
That knowledge that I had a community that I didn't even know about was sort of robbing me in high school.
I'm an international student from the Philippines, and at first I felt really disconnected from America, especially because of this deep imperial history that was bringing me here.
And it also feels like I have this huge missing gap of my own history and culture. In terms of feeling represented in the history that I've learned about, I would say no, I haven't.
Well, the history I've learned about, at least in school, is world history, European history, and American history, and neither of them touch significantly on Asians.
Well, I feel like we always take American history, and like obviously they talk about the Vietnam War, but it's mostly like the American side, so you don't really see much of what happens on like the Vietnamese side. And it's always like, oh, the Vietnamese are bad.
Before coming to Stanford, the only time I had ever really learned about Vietnamese people at all in my high school curriculum was when we read a book about the trauma of American soldiers in Vietnam.
I don't think I've really ever learned about Indian or like Indian American history at all, aside from my own like research or investigations.
It's this idea that if you want to learn about culture, it's an elective, whereas if you're someone who's white, it's just the history curriculum.
As more and more the Asian American term is going to be important in the United States, as Asian American people are growing in population and yearning to find that culture and that history that brings us all together.
It's kind of a weird place to be, like very American but also still like ethnically Asian, and I don't think those stories are discussed at all like in education.
I mean, I've never learned too much about Malaysians in any like history class or like any class in general that I've taken.
I really wish there was more support for Asian American studies and ways to get that specifically for South Asian folks.
I don't think I've really seen Stanford like motivating students to take these courses.
Stanford has a large emphasis on like STEM, and so liberal arts aren't really emphasized at all. They don't really reflect like much of like the liberal arts education or like ethnic education at all.
To highlight the Asian American studies here at Stanford University would be extremely important to continue.
That's continuing to fight for people like me.
Bringing in more tenured faculty to teach.
And like, I feel like one of those things that people kind of know, but they don't actually understand like the significance of the courses or like how many there are.
I have heard about like these classes being taught, for example, by a white professor.
History is told from the colonizer's perspective, so they don't really talk about indigenous populations or really populations of color at all.
Because there's inherently kind of a level of understanding that you can't get just by not having that identity.
I've been thinking a lot about why Asian American studies.
The influences of Asian Americans like throughout their history, like in the United States, their treatment.
It provides a space for people to explore different aspects of academia.
Actually, being in Asian American studies, I've been able to read about Vietnamese people by like actual Vietnamese authors.
Learning the history of Asian Americans in America and realizing like there are kids that have lived my similar experience and like have the same priorities as me.
What do I come from? Like, what is my heritage? One of the greatest values I found in the Asian American community at Stanford is starting to find some of those answers.
I think Asian American studies and Asian American issues needs to be highlighted more as a way of bringing this community together.
As someone who has often struggled to figure out like how to fit in, what motivates me, what keeps me going, having a connection to that heritage is like so important.
Ensure that Asian American Studies has provided a very good space for me to explore what it means to be radical in different points of view, different perspectives in the class.
beyond all that, it's just like a feeling. It was the sense of realizing that I had this community that I didn't know about the whole time.
And that, I think, is really deeply sacred work. Learning that your life was believed in, held, and loved by generations before you.
It's made me feel liberated, which, like, I know is a word that's thrown around a lot. I finally, like, learned what that means.
I realized that for me to be standing here at Stanford, for me to be working here, studying here, growing here, required decades of struggle on the part of my ancestors.
I come from a legacy of resistance, of fighting back against systemic oppression.
To discover it made me feel like so welcomed, I guess, and so empowered, just knowing that there have been a lot of people living like a similar existence as me through time.
And if I'd never taken an Asian American Studies course, I would never have known how many people love me.
Asian American issues and Asian American studies are extremely important to me and should be important to you as well.